Hey everybody, Jay Weidner. This is Reality Check. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And hit subscribe and all that stuff because I may hit 12,000. You never know. It's been a long trip, especially in the world of YouTube today. A couple days ago was the 48th anniversary of the launch of Apollo 17, the last mission to the moon. And so I took a time to have a celebration, and I brought out my spacecraft film 6 DVD set that I bought like 10 years ago and put it on my big screen TV, which I'd never done before, and began watching the extravehicular activities of 1, 2, and 3 of Apollo 17 on video on the big screen. And I have to tell you that this company, Spacecraft Films, stopped selling these DVDs about 3 years ago. And I was asking myself, did interest fall off, or what would be the reason to, do all this and then to stop selling something that cost like $90? And I watched them, and it was worse than 1960s Star Trek. The effects are absolutely abominable. You could see the stage line everywhere, every shot. So since they are no longer going to be letting us see Apollo 17, which apparently they're burying right now, I'm going to make a copy of this and put it up so everybody can see how utterly ridiculous the video is of Apollo 17. That said, today we have our guest that comes back. We usually have him on to talk about the future, and he was on 7 months ago and predicted that the second wave of the virus would hit in early November and sweep across all the way through into January. And he made a lot of other predictions that have come true too. So you know me, I judge you by your your ability to correctly predict the future. That's how I judge people. If you can make a prediction about the future, I'm on your side, and correctly. I mean, I'm on your side, and I want you by me, because that's what it's kind of a weird genius to be able to predict the future, and not psychically. You're taking facts around you, and then extrapolating and reaching a conclusion. I think that's what Jonny does. So we're back with Jonny Enoch. Hey, Jonny.
Hey, Jay, thanks for having me back. It's always great to be on here with the Reality Check audience. And yeah, no, there's so much that we're seeing now. We're seeing that it's no longer in the dark. We're talking about things like immunity passports, which we discussed a while back. And where that goes next is the immunity passports are attached to our future payment systems. We're going to be told that you going to the store to even buy milk is contingent on you getting that green light. And moreover, when we see this immunity program go forward, what we'll find is there will be certain mutations attached to certain parts of the world. And we're told that, okay, do you have these immunological privileges for, let's say, zones A, B, and C? We're seeing stuff like universal basic income. They're talking about the Great Reset out in the open through the economic forums. We have leaders talking about this. So it's very easy to see for a critical thinking person that there is a great blueprint that's being rolled out there. And the whole point of looking at this, even from these various angles, or even taking a esoteric or metaphysical perspective, is you see there's these ancient and great orders in the world. And there are great blueprints and things that take place. And so where are we evolving to next, and where are we headed? We have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, and I mean, this Israeli scientist came out the other day and said that the aliens are out there and they're just waiting for us to, like, I don't know, get better or something. I wasn't quite sure what we're supposed to be doing to have the aliens come and help us, but a lot of things are changing. There's no doubt about it. It's happening rapidly. And next time that you're on, I want to talk about the next round that we're going through right now. everything's in a jumble right now, and we don't really have a clear idea. My insiders told me that Joe would be elected, and then there's been some kind of change now, and he's telling me that they've talked to Joe, and he's got like the brain of an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, and it really freaked him out because they realized there was no holographic projection or body double that they could use that would solve all the problems that would be inherent in having this guy be president. So I don't know. I was told that the elites are letting the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, decide this thing, and they're out of it. So we'll see where that goes. And that's another reason I don't want to have you on to talk about the future, because I want to make sure we got a solid ground the next time that we talk about that. So today, what I want to talk about is something that both of us really find interesting. And
Yes.
it's a wide-ranging subject. That's another reason why I like it and how it all fits together. And so there's this guy, Ivan Sanderson. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Dr. Ivan Sanderson, 1972, wrote about the vile vortices.
Yep. Yeah, he wrote a book, and it was all about the underwater, unidentified submersible objects that are seen throughout history. And
Yes.
it's a listing of ship logs from the past and what captains of ships have seen out in the water, objects going in and out, glowing objects underneath the water, and also people, kind of aquatic people are also been reported. And I think that it's absolutely fascinating, because so much of the ocean is really not traveled ever. Everybody stays in the shipping lanes. Nobody's going to get out. Airplanes, by the way, don't travel over the ocean. I don't know if you know that. They skip around, like going across the Pacific. They skip around up the north through the Aleutian and Alaska and down. They go down the land through Russia, but they don't actually go over the Pacific, just to Hawaii, but not all the way across. They don't do that. And so even airplanes really don't travel over the wide expanses of the ocean. So there's this huge part of the earth that's largely undiscovered. And no one really knows what's down there. We've mapped it, but we've never really, we really don't know what's going on in the oceans, and anything could be going on there, right?
Well, that's the whole point of going back to what you said at the beginning of the show when you were holding up the DVDs for the Apollo missions, is that we've really been only given a little fraction of the story, because there's so many greater implications there. Before we, go further into this subject of what's in our oceans, and we really just have one ocean around the world.
Right.
But before we go into that, there's a great book out there people should get called Our Forbidden Moon. I think the author's name, if I remember, is David Bryant, but he talks about the hangars in the UK, where, I know you're an expert on this with the Hasselblad cameras from Kubrick. Nobody has ever done that subject the way you've done that, man. That's just unbelievable. You dug deep into Kubrick and Space Odyssey, but it's interesting that NASA gives him the gift of these cameras and these hangars that were replicas of the moon. There are these eyewitness testimony things saying that, hey, they went there, because I do believe we did land on the moon. First of all, we landed on the moon because we know that there is, not only at the Lure Observatory, we shoot these green lasers up at the moon, and we have these mirrors that bounce back the lasers. So we know we've been there, but you got to ask yourself, why would we fake the landing if not because of what they found up there? So they have these hangars that are actual replicas, and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin not only went there, but of course, Buzz is one of the only people that can say Neil before me, because, Neil was there first. But the one thing is that in that, we also have that on the Earth. We have these subterranean areas. We have these underwater areas. You're absolutely right. Jay, if you don't mind, I'd like to hop off with this into some of our old esoteric knowledge,
Sure.
Which is a subject I know you're very familiar with, as well as this, man. who I know is a hero to you as well as to me.
Yep.
This is Manly Palmer Hall, who not only was one of the greatest, minds that we'll ever see in our lifetimes, who out of his little center in Los Feliz, California, Manly Palmer Hall, he did over 8,000 extemporaneous lectures, just talking off the top of his head. And you guys watching this right now, you can go on YouTube and you can go check out a lot of these. They're online. But he wrote over 150 books, countless articles. He was absolutely prolific, just one of the most knowledgeable, prolific minds in the world, collecting this amazing library. Well, he wrote in this incredible book, his magnum opus book, which I know you have in your library, Jay. This is The Secret Teachings of All Ages. This was his masterpiece.
Books ever written.
I agree, Jay. This is, I agree, if not the most important book ever written that you can have. And if you go to get this, don't just get an abridged copy on Amazon. Get it from PRS. Order the big one with the full color prints. People always ask me, as a student of this book, because all my life I poured through this book. And as a teenager, that's all I did was read through Manly P. Hall's books. And so one of the most interesting quotes, and I put it aside here to share with the audience, and then I want to ask you, Jay, about what you think this means. I think this is one of the most interesting quotes from The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Manly P. Hall writes in there, "There are also legends to the effect that long before the appearance of human beings, there existed a race or a species of composite creatures which was destroyed by the gods. The temples of antiquity preserved their own historical records and possessed information concerning the prehistoric world that has never been revealed to the uninitiated." And we know that's very true of much knowledge. "According to these records, the human race evolved from a species of creature that partook somewhat of the nature of amphibian.
Yep.
For at that time, the primitive man had the gills of a fish and was partly covered with scales. To a limited degree, the human embryo demonstrates the possibility of such a condition. As a result of the theory of man's origin in water, the fish was looked upon as the progenitor of the human family. This gave us rise to the ichthyology of the Chaldeans, Phoenicians, and Brahmins. The American Indians believe that the waters of lakes, rivers, and oceans are inhabited by a mysterious people, the Water Indians." What do you think that means, Jay?
Well, first off, we are. There is little doubt that human beings had spent some time in the water. The pachyderms, be elephants, hippopotamuses, pigs, they all have bald, they're essentially bald like we are. And they have like coating of hair, but they don't have the big thick covering. And that indicates, because you move easier through water if you don't have a lot of hair. So that indicates that these were all one-time aquatic animals, including us. And we're very different from other apes in this aspect, and if you believe in evolution. And there's proof that we had webbed hands.
Yes.
There's evolutionary proof that we had webbed hands. There's evolutionary proof that that we lived in water. In fact, the aquatic ape theory says that the reason that our hips moved downwards from apes, because they do, that's how we can stand upright without the slope, is because we evolved in water, and we would sit in the water up to our neck, waiting for wildlife or something, or fishing or whatever. But also eating seafood is like really good for your brain. And if we were eating a lot of seafood, then that would also explain the sudden advancement in brain size. So there's a lot of theory, a lot of weight behind the aquatic ape theory. And I know a lot of people think we were made by aliens, and I'm not saying we weren't. I'm just saying that whatever species that the alien, the Anunnaki, whoever took to make us, that creature had one time been in the water. You know, you could be on the land, then in the water, and come back to the land. I mean, we're talking millions of years here.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen these ancient legends of mermaids and mer people, not only from like Disney's The Little Mermaid, that we go back into Denmark for that, or even on the side of your coffee cup, We see that green siren, that goddess who's, like Pisces, connected with Isis and Egypt, and connected to the seal on the various royal families across Europe. It's interesting that if we go back into the ancient Chaldeans and the ancient Babylonian people, we have this legend of Dagon. So Dagon, who we also called Nimrod, Oannes, or Sidon, connected to agriculture. This story is very, very familiar around the world, of that he comes to these ancient primitive people after the cataclysm, probably, somewhere around just after 12,000 years ago.
Yep.
He comes to their shores, and they didn't even know how to make fires, but he's portrayed as coming to them with these scales of a fish and this fish hat on, which of course we call the mitre, and which is what the Pope wears. But we have all these other stories that, sure, we could say, okay, are these connected to the astrological age of Pisces? When we have this story of, let's say, Jonah and the whale in the Bible, or, various connections to these mythological creatures. But there seems to be these seafaring people, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to show you something. I found this. My wife has this book called Deities and Dolphins, and it's about these people that lived in the desert in Arabia, and they worship the dolphin, the Nabateans, and they worship dolphins. This is 3,000 years ago, and all their art, which is just beautiful. I could show you pictures. Has all these dolphins in their hair and everything, and also they have mermaids and mermen in their art, which is incredible. And you have to wonder what these people who are living in the middle of a desert, it doesn't make any sense. Why have this aquatic relationship when they're nowhere near? And I can't explain it. Nobody else can either. It's like one of the mysteries of history. They can't explain why the Nabateans had these fish worshiping gods and goddesses and dolphins, and it seems as if there was a ubiquitous worldwide culture once that worshipped the sea gods.
I absolutely agree with you. And as you pointed it out to me before in our discussions, we have the Una, who were the progenitors of the Japanese, yes, who are these, they have this sort of very extraterrestrial aspect to it, but also look over at the Dogon Tribes that we see over in Africa. Here we have this aquatic race who are connecting to Sirius B, the aquatic planet. And in some of the folks I've talked to in this ufological research and whatnot, I've had guys in a very prestigious elite grouping of scientific knowledge tell me that in the near future, we will discover, as they have been privy to knowledge, that on the area near Jupiter, okay, the moon, what's Europa? Europa, the moon of Jupiter, is actually an aquatic moon with 25-foot wide whale-like creatures swimming on the surface of it. Now, when I've talked to Mark D'Antonio, our mutual friend, who's an astrobiologist, basically, he's told me and also written about it that he goes, yeah, we have the precursors there. He goes, mainstream science hasn't fully confirmed that aspect, but it's entirely plausible. Now, with that also, with these Dogon tribes and who they're saying where they come from and their knowledge and their beings that are portrayed, which is very, very interesting here. There is a lady out in Vancouver, Canada, and she's written several books about Atlantis. Her name is Valerie Bonwick, and this is do you know of her work?
Yeah.
She's very interesting because she's written in her books that she's had telepathic contact with this group, and they're called the Dagonites. They're the offspring and progenitors of Dagon. So just like we go back to the stories of Neptune and Poseidon and everything where we see the Atlanteans coming from, she says the survivors of Atlantis, they have these underwater kingdoms. And they essentially, that these civilizations still exist on the earth and that they're helping humanity. Interestingly enough, I was talking recently to another Canadian I know, and he's written a lot of books. He's often on Jimmy Church. His name is Jason Quitt, if any of you out there are familiar with him.
I know Jason.
Yeah, and Jason says that he's had these lifelong out-of-body experiences, astral projections, and he's been showing stuff about the Earth. And I was just on a very long phone call with him the other day about this, and I brought this up with him, and he'll tell you that he believes that this aquatic race, this highly advanced aquatic race, came here through some sort of portal system. That they came here and they were part of these Atlanteans. So I just thought that was interesting because it sort of ties into what Valerie Bonwick's saying and what this book is talking about.
Yeah, and the Sirius connection is really interesting. You know, we don't have historical facts on it. It does look like we're in a kind of a binary relationship between our sun and Sirius. And let's not forget that Osiris is a play on words of Sirius, and that Isis is, you know, the goddess of the dog star, which is Sirius, and the Dogon, and all of these have all these legends about these people that live in the ocean. And then we have the myths from all over the world that Graham Hancock has put together in Fingerprints of the Gods, about a group of people who arrive and help people out and after the catastrophe. And so these myths are everywhere. Native Americans have it, the Japanese have it, the Africans have it, Asians have it, all over the world. Northwest Indians in the United States have it. And so there is this relationship, and it's really been kind of overlooked by ufology and even the ancient historians.
I absolutely agree with you. And it's really interesting because when we look at these ancient aquatic hominids and how they've been discussed, they're first of all, when you look at ancient Egypt for their cosmological stories, we have various cosmologies there, various cosmological stories there. Like we have one when you go over to Karnak or Thebes, we call that the Theban story. The area where we go for Hermes, we call that Hermiopolis. There's the Hermiopolis story. And in those stories, we have this strange tale that eventually, by the way, evolved over near Memphis with the story of Ptah, which is the progenitor god of Egypt. But when you're there, there's a story, as Muhammad Ibrahim has pointed out to me, where we have these aquatic-looking humanoid beings. So we have these reptile beings, and these frogs and serpents that are mating towards making this human being, which is really interesting. Yep. Even in the crypts of Hathor's temple, down below where you see the famous, what's been called the light bulb glyph, which I believe is actually a lotus bowl with the serpentine energy. But there is a strange serpentine amphibian-headed hominid being holding these sculpting knives that is on the side, which is very, very strange. But in Egypt, and again, Jay, let me reiterate this. I'm very, very excited that that you're going there. We're going to be going there with Patricia and Muhammad coming up next year, and everybody's welcome to join us. But when you're in Egypt, one of the temples, as we're going to be going to, is Edfu Temple. And on the walls of the Edfu Temple, it's absolutely spectacular. You see this story, the cataclysmic Atlantis destruction story, the same one that Solon would have seen when he went to the temple of Neferu on the Nile Delta that washed away, when he went to go meet with Sanchis there. The same story, I believe, is upon the wall that shows the serpent from the heavens that some believe is an asteroid. It could have been all of the above, drawing it all in, but some believe it's there and it's coming down and destroying the earth. Well, it shows these seafaring beings that are coming here, but it also shows beings like, when we look at Osiris looks very much like Dagon, who had the fish-headed hat, the elongated fish-headed hat. And these ancient progenitors that were there are shown as a seafaring people that come there on boats. Now, the same thing happens when we talk to Brian Forster about the Paracas people and the missionaries, the Atlantean missionaries that we learn about in the codices over in Madrid, when we go back to the story of Cortez, where they thought he was returning as one of the seafaring gods when he arrived on a boat with the cross and the serpent symbol. This idea of these beings that had these colorful feathers or scales coming to their shores and teaching these people with the story of Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan is very similar to Dagon. So when we go beyond that, that there are these people, that brings us over to the ancient Phoenicians, which I know you've been studying a lot, right?
Yeah. So, I asked myself a question a few months ago, like if there really is, an Illuminati, a cabal, the people on the top, that kind of thing, then there has to be a pedigree of some kind. And then what would that be? And then, what series of events would get you to be the top dog, right? And then I realized that it would have to be the very first humans who built awesome boats and went out into the open sea, because they would have the first maps. They would meet all the people that were out there. So they would be the first ambassadors to the world. And could bring like their mining specialists with them, and they could point out, oh, over there, you're probably going to find gold, and silver and diamonds are probably going to be over there. And you would have the whole world kind of figured out, right? I mean, it makes sense, right? If you were first. And so who was first? And that would be the Phoenicians. And and I'm not saying first of all time, I'm saying first after the catastrophe. I'm not saying either that the Phoenicians are these advanced people that may have survived the catastrophe. I don't believe that either. I believe the Phoenicians had a natural progression where they discovered how to build boats, and they built awesome seafaring vessels, and were actually perhaps the most interesting of ancient people in the Mediterranean at the time. 3,000 years ago, they started out, so they're contemporary with the Sumerians, and they were brilliant because they never got in wars. And if you look at their art, which is fantastic, by the way, they're the first people that I can find that have mermaids and mermen in their statuary. And so the first people that ventured out into the high sea, out the gates of Hercules into the Atlantic Ocean, were probably the Phoenicians. I think most historians would agree with that. And the cocaine mummies that were found in Egypt are probably, the cocaine was brought from South America, and tobacco too, from South America by the Phoenicians. Their records indicate they went up the Amazon and were everywhere. And we find also in Michigan and in the Great Lakes area, tons and tons of copper mined. We can see the damage to the area, and it's been dated at about 2,000, 3,000 years ago. And that's just when the Bronze Age is starting. And who's the progenitors of the Bronze Age? It's the Phoenicians. They're the ones that are coming back with copper and tin and making all this stuff up and selling it to everybody. And the Phoenicians were the first cosmopolitan people. They were, and they were really, really smart. And they never told anybody about who they were. That's why we don't know much about them. It's actually very difficult to find much out about the Phoenicians because they hid everything. And if you join them, you had to go through a hierarchy, very close to what Freemasonry is, to reach the top. And everybody is keeping secrets. Well, what are they keeping secrets about? They're keeping secrets about their maps, where everything is, probably escape lands that they can go to if danger comes, which is a very important thing to understand. If you've got a map of most of the world, you're really not going to be in any danger because you can take off and go someplace else immediately and start all over again. So, but the Phoenicians, they didn't believe in war, they believed in trade. They were very similar to like today's New World Order, where they believe that trade between countries is what will unite the world. But the Phoenicians didn't believe in trade among countries. They believed that they could control all other empires through trade. And so they would come back with all the good stuff on their boats, and their artisans would make awesome stuff, and then they would trade it for food and all sorts of other things. And pretty soon the whole Mediterranean became dependent on the Phoenicians. They were the ones that were producing everything, and so everyone was reticent to attack Phoenicia because then they would cut the trade off, and you needed to have that trade because Phoenicia was really the first trading company on a seafaring level. So Phoenicia is really the key, and I think that's where the Phoenix, the legend of the Phoenix, comes from. Although Phoenicia really stands for purple, it means purple because they discovered how to make purple dyes, and everybody wanted the purple dyes, and so that was another thing that made Phoenicia so amazing. But the thing is that if they really were the first people to go out into the world, and they were, it looks like, after the cataclysm, I mean, then they are probably the first people to come into contact with these aquatic creatures, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said so many great things in there, not only about how there they are descending out from the Pillars of Hercules, which, by the way, is the Rock of Gibraltar, when we move out into those areas. And, you know, I've always looked at the similarity between when we say Cometian, like ancient Kemet or Egypt, Cometian and Phoenician. I believe they were one and the same before the cataclysmic destruction. And it's interesting because we know they were going all over the world because they had the cedars of Lebanon. They could make their boats and do their thing, and they were very advanced from that. In fact, Egypt, we have direct connections from Egypt to there, not only in the mythology, in the death of Osiris, where we know he was chopped up into 42 pieces, you know, when he came to this demise because of Set. And by the way, the 42 is very significant in the mysteries. Not only do we find 42 steps when we count them up in the various temples, or 42 tribes, you know, listed, but in the pieces where he was buried, part of him was buried when we look over in Phoenicia, or even look at the structures you find over at Baalbek. And connecting it over to Peru in those places is very interesting because, of course, look at what Thor Heyerdahl showed us in the Kon-Tiki expeditions. And, you know, as far as Thor Heyerdahl goes, I mean, today our mutual friend, Brian Forster, who you just had on, he's gone far beyond even what Thor Heyerdahl showed us, even going over to Easter Island and places where we see these elongated headed figures and how far they reached around the world. There's a magnificent influence there. But as far as this goes, I also believe these Phoenicians were, as you pointed out, there's these initiations like a secret society. I believe this is where the Druids came from. So and
the Vikings.
Absolutely. Good point. The Vikings also, that's a very, very good point. Here we have these seafaring people coming all over the world after these particular instances. So when we also look at the idea of Enoch, who we have connected to Thoth, or Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, and the symbolism and the ancient mystery schools attached to that. Enoch is Phenoch. And this is a Phoenician. Even look at the Emerald Tablet. Everybody likes to talk about the Emerald Tablet and where it's found. It is Proto-Phoenician, just like Proto-Hebrew looks like Proto-Phoenician. It is very, very much connected.
That's right. And the thing is that once you realize that the might that comes from having a strong navy, then you can kind of bounce around in history between the Phoenicians and now, and look at all of the great seafaring empires. First Rome, and then Spain and Portugal, which were really kind of one, and then England. And you can see that it's moving north, and then it went to the United States, and then the United States was the biggest seafaring power, and now we're getting eclipsed by China, who seems to know that the only way to really have a root in world empire is to run the seas. And so now China is now moving out their navies. And the thing is it's not just, so if Phoenicia decided that, you know, they didn't want to be a one-horse little country, and they wanted to expand their power surreptitiously, because remember, they have a very secret society. Their society was so secret, by the way, that foreigners were not allowed into the homes of Phoenicians. Why? Because they didn't want the foreigners to see how opulent a lifestyle that they had. So they were kind of, when they go out in public, they were wear rags and stuff, but inside their house was incredible. And also there's a lot of evidence that while Phoenicia was giving the Mediterranean the Bronze Age, they had secretly already gone to India, saw the iron forging going on in India, brought it back to Phoenicia, and secretly were forging iron without letting anyone know. And the reason we know that is because the Phoenician boats have iron rivets in them. So we know that the Phoenicians in the Bronze Age had already discovered iron. We're on their way and didn't tell anybody. Think about the genius of that. Didn't tell anybody. They kept it within their society. And when Phoenicia wanted to conquer other lands, and they did, like everybody else, they never used an army. They walked in to the village or whatever they wanted to take over, and they said, here's your choice. We give you a ton of money to leave, or you join us, but you have to join our secret society and keep all of our secrets. It's up to you. And that's how they conquered land. And so you can well imagine if they've been out to the St. Lawrence Seaway, to the Amazon. Okay, well then what's going to stop them from going everywhere and being everywhere and seeing everything? And so I think that they say that the other thing that has to be pointed out is that in the Bible it says that Hiram Abiff helped Solomon build the temple. Who is the hell is Hiram Abiff? Hiram is a city in Phoenicia. He's a Phoenician king, and he helped the Jews build their temple. And then you wonder, okay, and by the way, Phoenicia is right where Lebanon and Israel are now. So that's where Phoenicia was. So you look out at world power and you have to say, who is in charge here? And how did they get there? And I think that this is how they got there. They had these incredible boats. They conquered the world. They used one escape valve after another. First, it was Rome. After Greece attacked them, Alexander the Great, after Greece attacked them, they said, screw it, we can't stay around here anymore. It's too dangerous. So they began migrating. This is my theory. I have very little proof of it outside of linguistics, but I believe that they went to Italy and became the Venetians, which, by the way, in Latin is very close to Phoenician. So, and I believe that they spread out into that, and then they just kept moving their empire, finally to England, where they conquered the entire world via boats in the East India Trading Company, and then the United States, which became, and here's the other thing, before I stop with this. I once asked an insider, was asking him about the secret space program, and I said, what agency of the US government is in charge of our secret space program? And guy, without batting an eye, goes, oh, the US Navy's always been in charge of outer space.
Yes.
So they're also in charge of going up that way too. So the Phoenicians are in some ways the linchpin of history. And what's your friend, the Lebanese friend of yours who wrote?
Yeah, well, now you and I have talked to him together, but my friend Karim El-Koussa.
Yeah.
He's written all kinds of bestsellers in Lebanon and all over the world. He's written Jesus the Phoenician Code. He very much links all of that. And, just jumping in on that, the old Masonic nursery rhyme, because a lot of our nursery rhymes come from Freemasonry. A lot of them, like, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the 3 levels of initiation. With rub-a-dub-dub, 3 men in the tub. Well, the same is true of row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. That is exactly about the boats that are carrying the supplies to the temple.
Exactly. And what people don't realize is that Egypt was the big power at the time of the Phoenicians, but they didn't have a navy. They had a navy that went up and down the Nile in flatboats to carry stuff, but they weren't really all that interested in going out and having a big navy. So Phoenicians became kind of the rental navy for Egypt. And Egypt loved what they were bringing in. They were bringing in all sorts of, cedar and copper and all sorts of stuff. So Egypt, in a way, the one country that had some sway over Egypt at the time was Phoenicia. And there was a very close relationship between the two. And when and so the Hittites and several other Phoenician neighbors were starting to get really irritated with the success of Phoenicia, and they wanted to invade them. And there was all these rumors going around that there was going to be 4 or 5 countries were all going to massively invade Phoenicia all at once and then steal everything, because finally everybody began realizing that they were the richest country in the area. And then suddenly, out of the blue, about 1,000 boats come out from Greece and North Mediterranean and begin destroying all of the enemies of the Phoenicians without ever doing anything against the Phoenicians. It's called the Sea People's War. And they overturned, and there you have it. The Phoenicians, in a way, you have to say, had a surrogate army that came down, destroyed all of their enemies, and then left and went back. And it's like World War Zero. Nobody ever talks about it. But Phoenicians, I think, are the linchpin of history of the last 6,000 years.
You know what's really interesting? It comes to mind with that also. Looking at these seafaring connections, is I start thinking about Jordan Maxwell for a moment, because again, he's someone I've known, you've known forever with. But when Jordan Maxwell and I, we would do our yearly trips, and this year obviously we couldn't do it, but we always go on road trips and whatnot and hang around Los Angeles. I'm a big Disneyland fan. I'm also a big Walt Disney fan. So I'm not going to be one of those guys out there that's uncovering some dark, strange conspiracy about Disney, because honestly, I haven't found it. I found nothing but the fact that Walt Disney was a beautiful man, and he was involved in all kinds of, he was a mystically minded guy. I don't know what the Walt Disney Company is like today as far as their intentions, but, so far I haven't uncovered the dark rumors that people have out there. But when I would go there, Jordan Maxwell would tell me, because I love looking at all the intricate little details and beautiful things in Disneyland. And symbolism, there's so much symbolism there. Even where the submarine ride is, that Disney originally wanted to have that as an Atlantis tribute. You can still see the artifacts in there from these ancient, huge blocks and pillars he wanted in there. So when you go through there, there is an area that used to be called, it still exists today, but it used to be for 33rd degree Masons, for when after Walt died. It was over in the area between where Frontier and Adventureland meets in Anaheim, California. It was called Club 33. And it still exists. It's just an expensive club you can join. But the old entrance to the Masonic Club there was in the Pirates of the Caribbean. And today, Club 33 is just over top of Pirates, so you may not realize it, but this is the only place in the park where you can drink alcohol, and you look down at the people over top the Blue Bayou restaurant. So in there, I would say, what about the old Masonic connections? Because Jordan's been there. You guys can go Google this. You can look up, Jordan's been to Disneyland several times, and he's been there with Michael Eisner, George Lucas. The pictures are on the web. It's not a secret. And so he's gotten some pretty interesting information over the years for the inside scoop. So when you look down at there, you see, of course, the connections to Hiram Abiff with the skull and crossbones, the Jolly Roger. This is actually a signal to all their old buddies with Templar Masonry, because what people may not realize is that the Templars, when they were being persecuted, when Jacques de Molay was being persecuted on Friday the 13th, 1307, the Templars, who later became the Hospitallers and everything like that, they became the Knights of Malta. And after they became the Knights of Malta, they became the Pirates of the Caribbean. And then where do you think all those treasures went? This is where we get our banks and our various connections from that old connection.
They would bury their stolen money on the bank of an island, and that's how the word bank started, according to Jordan.
Right, exactly. And Jordan, his famous thing that he'll always talk about, as you know, and I'm not very good at breaking it all down like he is, or you probably know more on it than I do, but he'll always talk about maritime admiralty law, and that all of our laws are actually based on the laws of the sea, even today. And when we look back at England, because we get this idea that when you have a birth certificate and you're being birthed, this is like BIRTH is like BERTH for a ship, because you're coming out of a canal, you're coming out of your mother in that area, as well as the ideas, like you pointed out, you have a currency that flows between two riverbanks. And so even when we ship something today, even if you ship it by air, you call it shipping. The shipping, because it's all based on the laws of the sea. And these laws of the sea are different. That's why when you go out on a cruise ship and you want to start gambling, they say, I'm sorry, you can't go to the casino until we're in international waters, because actually this is still where our laws are based off of.
Laws of the land. There's
right.
two sets of laws, the laws of the land and the laws of the sea. And like our Constitution is the laws of the land, not the laws of the sea. And the laws of the sea are way different than the laws of the land. And yeah, you're right. The pirates were probably the Phoenicians, maybe outcast Phoenicians, but still people who had incredible shipping, boat sailing skills. And of course, this is where the false flag comes from. The pirates would see a Spanish boat with their spyglass, and then they would run the Spanish flag up the mast, and then they would sail toward the boat, and they would all dress up in Spanish, naval outfits. And then the Spanish thought, and changed the name of the boat. And then the Spanish thought it was their friends coming. And of course, it was too late by the time they realized what was really going on. And that's where the term false flag comes from.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So there's so many profound connections we find there to these ancient people, and sort of what's happened as a changeover in today's world and where these traditions come from. But these ancient knowledge keepers who were there before the cataclysms and then after, that kept evolving forward, there is a great pattern that we cannot deny.
Yeah, and it would seem to me that the first people that went out into the oceans are going to be the first people to meet this aquatic race and get their knowledge. So, and come back with it. And so we've come full circle. We start out with, Oannes and the people who are giving us knowledge after the catastrophe coming from the ocean, or at least appearing to come from the ocean, to the Phoenicians and the control of the world. I truly believe that the people in control of the world right now were probably related to the Phoenicians, and I think they're still in control. I don't think there's no reason why they would relent control.
I absolutely agree with you. But where our science is going now, even in transhumanism, where we're taking these nanoparticles, these one atom thick silicon hexagonal little graphene pieces, and we're putting them into the body. They've done things with injecting them into the eyes so that the eyes can see. They've done this in rats now so they can see night vision. We know they're moving into infrared. They're using these for military applications. But from what I've heard, even types of classified technology have been there to inject the nanoparticles into the lungs so that someone could breathe underwater for over an hour or more. And they've apparently had that technology for some time, biotechnology. So the question is, are these reports we've traditionally heard of people see mermaids and sirens and survivors, are they real? Have you heard of anything that has substantiated that through your contacts over the years?
Well, I've seen a lot of stuff, and people have, the people that are in the Navy, high up in the Navy, have told me that there is this going on. And there was an incident, I believe it was early 1980s, I believe, and it was in the Persian Gulf. It was a submarine, and it tracked an object coming at it that was doing about 1,000 knots, which is unbelievable underwater. And it's portrayed at the beginning of James Cameron's movie, The Abyss. this scene is he recreated this scene where the submarine got upended by this fast moving object. So the Navy has to know about this and has to have been in contact with them. I can't, I can't think of any other. They have to be. It just has to be. And the Navy, by the way, the U.S. Navy is the only constitutionally sanctioned intelligence agency. The Office of Naval Intelligence is the only intelligence agency sanctioned and in the original Constitution of the United States. So the Navy feels like they're the top guys, and they don't like the CIA and all these other agencies. They really don't like them, and they have this very independent view of everything, and a very patriotic point of view as opposed to other agencies. The people that I know that are in the Navy higher ups are the most patriotic of anyone in the military, I think. I'm pretty sure of that. And so they have this special relationship because remember, it was John Paul Jones was the first guy to create our Navy. And the first thing that was created was not an army, but a Navy. The United States' first military force was a Navy. And we were going all around the world, stopping terrorism and everything in the 1700s and 1800s. That's what that line in the Marine song, the shores of Tripoli. So the Marines were sent in to stop the Libyans who were pirating in the Mediterranean. They would blow up their boats and stuff, and so the first world cop, in a way, was the U.S. Navy.
It's incredible. You mentioned James Cameron. So you think that there's somebody there that's a big time Hollywood name. You think there's someone there that has directly experienced these beings then?
I do, because he's really into, he spent a lot of money, about $3 million, renting a submarine, doing research on Titanic, which was 1996 or 5 when he was doing the research. And then he became obsessed with underwater after that. And his brother, who's a brilliant engineer, began developing bathyspheres. And then, of course, we know that he made probably the best Hollywood movie ever made about these underwater creatures, The Abyss, which was a bomb at the box office, which is too bad. I can understand why it was a bomb. It was a little complicated of a plot, but it was a good movie. And of course, we meet them in these underground kind of plasma phosphorus kind of creatures. And then, of course, Cameron went down the trench, the Mariana Trench, and made a movie about it, a documentary about it. And that's a very interesting documentary to watch, by the way. I think it's on Amazon Prime. But he takes this, his brother designed this deep underwater bathysphere, I guess they would call it, and dropped it down into the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest trench on Earth. And Cameron alone inside this thing with cameras rolling goes all the way down into the deepest dive that any man has ever made. And he's down there, he gets to the bottom, and I wasn't there. So I love James Cameron. I think he's a brilliant filmmaker, probably one of the most brilliant, in fact. But so he's down there, and after a few minutes of looking out the window and stuff, you can see a kind of a growing nervousness on him. And I'm not putting anything on him. Maybe he sees a meter that's going wacky or something, right? And he's a little concerned about it. He knows he's on camera, so he has to kind of keep cool about it. But he ends the trip prematurely and says, "Pull me up." And he's looking more and more nervous, as to the point to where finally you can see that he's kind of looking like he's starting to crack a little bit by something, and I don't know what it is. And then he says, "Pull me up." And then I'm surprised that he wanted to go up so quickly. And he's only down there, I don't know, not very long, 10 minutes maybe. And then he's pulled right back up. So it's a curious thing that this guy who has deep interest in underwater and in boating and goes all over the world on these incredible ships, exploring the world with his brother, also made a film about meeting the underwater humanoids or whatever they are, and also is the only guy to go down into the Mariana Trench all the way down, and something scared him. I mean, maybe one day we'll find out what it was. I mean, it could have been anything, but I think we can conclude that a smart guy like James Cameron, he didn't just go down there to take a trip. I mean, he made the movie The Abyss, which is about aliens living or whatever, living in the Mariana Trench. Then he goes and explores the Mariana Trench. What does he know, that we don't? And we know that Cameron is weirdly prescient in his movies. He predicts things and seems to me like he might have some intelligence connections in some way that give him information about the future or technologies that are being developed by DARPA, things like that. And so I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that James Cameron, and I hear Avatar 2 takes place almost entirely underwater. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, he's definitely in the know. I mean, look at his move to New Zealand, because he said he knew something was coming up, some geopolitical transition. He's also in Avatar. I mean, these proxified consciousness vehicles that are going into other planets and what it's like. I mean, he does have something he's rolling out there. It's interesting on the show on Travel Channel Discovery that I do. It's called the Alaska Triangle, where we've looked at over how there's 16,000 people who have gone missing. They've vanished without a trace. We've had naval reports of these UFOs coming up out of the water. We've examined this, how they come and go, just like up at Lake Titicaca, 12,500 feet above sea level, up in Peru and Bolivia. Here we have the local people in these areas living on these. Yeah, exactly. And we have people up there that report these UFOs coming and going. And I've talked to these people. They're not the type of people to embellish. And they they tell it how it is. Yeah. And I was up there with Brian not too long ago, and we were discussing this. It's absolutely astonishing that we have these underwater bases, even off the coast of Malibu. There in California, we have this strange lento-like doorway where we've actually, we were doing this on the show, looking at the satellite imagery of this. There are these strange underwater areas that make me think that there's a lot more going on than what we've been told.
Yeah, and there's these weird tracks that are all over the seafloor that take right and left turns, and they're wide. It almost looks like they're mining something off the ocean floor, and they're everywhere. There's I forget the guy's name. He's gone now. He had a site called Mars Anomaly Research Society, Joseph something. He's still up, and he did all these Google satellite images of the ocean and found all sorts of odd stuff. There's definitely something going on under the water.
The world is filled with absolutely strange mysteries for us to uncover, for us to investigate further. And that's the great thing about this all. When we start talking about this, and when the reality check audience starts watching your shows, Jay, and asking these questions and digging in deeper, all of us put our puzzle pieces together to form the big picture, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what one of the things I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to show that what we think is going on and what is really going on is really much stranger than we can think. And and another thing, and this is a little bit off topic, but not really, is that I was reading this physicist recently talking about the possibility that we're living in a simulation, that everything that we're experiencing is a computer program simulation. And he said, there is one way that you can find out if we're living in a simulation. He said, a close examination of our history, if you do a close examination of our history and you begin finding inconsistencies everywhere, then that is a sign that we are probably in a simulation. And his reasoning went like this. If you're making a program that's going to be a simulation, you're going to spend a lot less time programming the past, the phony past, than you are the present and the future. So you just kind of throw together the past and then work all of your knowledge on the present and the future. And so people, would, if they start looking at the past, they begin seeing glaring inconsistencies in the past. And I think that's what we're finding. And I think that's one of the things that I want to pursue in the near future is how friggin' weird is our past? Because it's becoming apparent that it's a lot weirder than I ever thought, actually.
I totally agree. There's a lot of questions that we need to be asking ourselves.
We really do. Hey, Johnny, it's really nice having you on, and you're always very interesting and knowledgeable. And we have a tour coming up, we hope, in June, going to the Great Pyramid and Egypt, and we're going to spend the solstice in the Great Pyramid, right?
We absolutely are. People can find out about it at www.returnofthekepher-cycle. And this tour is going to be absolutely amazing with you, myself, Muhammad Ibrahim, Patricia. We are going to have an amazing time there exploring these things. And, this tour is like no other, as you know, Jay, because we're going there during a solstice alignment. It's going to be amazing to see all these doors open up for us to look into these things with an expert remote viewer. And most of all, also, I love that Patricia is bringing these perspectives and helping our group out there, helping you guys to learn how to be remote viewers. But at the same time, Jay, walking there with you and Muhammad with the profound, collection of knowledge that you guys have, all of it coming together in our group. I find every time we go there, we all solve puzzles together, but this group is going to be special.
Yeah, I'd like to get Muhammad on Reality Check. I know he's in Egypt, so we have this huge time difference, but I think we can work it. I'll get up early and he can stay up late or something, and we'll get it worked out. So I am going to have him on the show to talk about amazing discoveries that we're going to be looking at in Egypt. And it's going to be great.
It will be great. Thank you so much for having me on, Jay. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, it really is, Johnny, and I really appreciate it. And we'll have you back to talk about, the downloads on the future here really soon. Hey, everybody, I'm Jay Weidner. Thanks for watching Reality Check. Subscribe, hit like, and all that other stuff. I just really want you to know I do appreciate you so much. Thank you so much.